Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have a lot of very interesting updates, and first we're going to talk about the United States of America, more precisely about Joe Biden. After failure on debates that took place a day ago, Joe Biden decided to continue his president race, and he's not going to take himself off from this competition. You know that a lot of people were expecting during the previous 24 hours that he would do this, but as we understand, he's not going to. And after a very small pause, very silent pause, but that was very loud, the U.S. House Speaker Johnson urged administration members to fire Biden. New York Post. That was stated by the New York Post. As you can see, the removal of Biden requires the decision of the majority of the members of his cabinet and the vice president. This has never happened in the history of the United States of America. Later, we got additional updates from different magazines, from different newspapers. For example, this is the first page of the Time. The new cover by the Time magazine is not good look for the Biden campaign. As you can see, everybody is asking him to fall back. Everybody is asking him to stop his president, let's say, race, and to be replaced by someone else. The New York Times editorial board has called on U.S. President Joe Biden to drop out of the ongoing race for the president, allowing another Democratic candidate to be the nominee in November's elections against former President Donald Trump. So Democratic Party understand that this is going to be not just disaster, this is going to be complete defeat if Joe Biden continues. Now, as I understand, Democratic Party understand that anyway they will lose, but the most important not to lose. Let's say if Donald Trump gets 80% or 70%, and let's say the Democratic Joe Biden is going to have just 20 or 30%, this is going to be a complete disaster. Of course, Democratic Party want to get something like it was always 50-50 plus minus 3% to Democratic or to Republican candidate. As for Donald Trump, after a significant victory, he continued his president campaign, and today he stated that Russia, China and Korea will not be enemies for the United States if a reasonable president is at the head of the White House. This is his statement. Obviously, he is planning to finish the war all over the world, the conflicts as well, and he will try to improve, first of all, the economy, and first the production, and many other important things that's very important for everybody in the world, but not just for some billionaires and weaponry producers. Now let's move to Ukraine itself. We have a lot of very interesting updates all over the line of combat contact, and we have a lot of changes on the map. Obviously, Zelensky and his team were trying to remove the unnecessary noise, unnecessary updates from the line of combat contact before the summit, NATO summit that is going to take place in the Washington. The thing is that during the previous few days, the Ukrainians lost significant territories, and you know that most of the mappers are making changes on the map based on the pro-Ukrainian sources. The Russians always also publish some updates, but as for majority of changes on maps, 70% of changes that we're making on the maps are made based on Ukrainian sources. And during the previous few days, the Ukrainian sources were in a silence mode, probably were preparing before the NATO summit, trying to reduce as much as possible the changes on the ground. But after the debates, after the Biden failure, after all these things, as I understand, the President Office of Ukraine allowed the Ukrainians, allowed the sources to continue publishing updates about the situation on the ground. And the situation is very poor for the Ukrainians, and obviously develops in Russian favor. But let's start one step by step, and first let's talk about Vovchansk area. As you can see, we have significant number of updates, and most of them are located and in the vicinity of Vovchansk aggregate plant, and in the southern part, and between the Citadel and aggregate plant itself. As for the southern part, we have report, according to different mappers, neutral mappers, that the Ukrainians, as a result of counter-offensives in this area, managed to almost restore control over the southern part of the stronghold, so forcing the Russians to fall back towards the deep inside of the territory towards the Yuri Gagarina Street. So this is obviously very important progress from the Ukrainian side, but the Russians continue publishing more and more videos of how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainians who were trying to cross the river and to send additional reinforcements. And the Russians are saying that this is one of the biggest source of Ukrainian losses during this process of rotation or evacuation. The Ukrainians lose even more than they try to rotate and to evacuate. Sometimes if Ukrainians send 60-70 soldiers from southern part in the north part, just 30 are able to get their positions. The next other part is being, let's say, under very heavy fire, being, let's say, forced to fall back or wounded or even more. As for aggregate plant, we have additional updates. As you can see, the Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were bombing and attacking the Russian forces inside of this industrial zone, and based on this video we can see that another building was captured by the Russians. We have adjusted the map and we added additional building under complete Russian control. Maybe the Russians have already established complete control over the entire industrial zone. We don't know for sure because we don't have geolocations confirming this. We just have different updates from different mappers about additional progress. But this building was captured and we have geolocated proofs. We are talking about this part. As for this part of aggregate plant, we still haven't received anything. Right before making the video, we can start receiving updates of significant number of FPV drone strikes in this area. As you can see, between the Citadel and aggregate plant itself, the Ukrainian sources published the videos of how they were FPV droning the forces of 57th mechanized brigade. In this video we can see the Russian convoy with tanks, with different defense shields, different additional armor, and how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians in this part of Vovchansk. Obviously this is enough of information to make additional adjustments on the map, and before the next video we will color this territory complete under complete Russian control because we have enough of information. So now, as you can see, we have enough of proofs confirming that the Russians are not encircled inside of aggregate plant, because the Russians have enough of connections, enough of roads between aggregate plant and the mainland. But on the other hand, we see that currently the Ukrainians who are located in the Citadel are being encircled and gods appeared in the cauldron. So the situation, as you can see, is very difficult, and step by step the situation develops in Russian favor but not in Ukrainian one. Now let's move further. We have additional and significant number of updates from Chasiv Yar direction. Let's go there first of all. Before Chasiv Yar, let's stop a bit, make a small stop in the southern Kupiansk direction. According to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions and to capture this territory. We are waiting for additional updates and additional geolocations that can confirm this, but obviously this is significant progress from the Russian side. As you can see, the Russians are moving towards the Zherebets river. Now let's move further in the southern direction. During the previous night we haven't received almost anything from Siversk direction. There are two important positions. The first one is the Ukrainian positions along Seversky Donetsk river, and this territory is under very heavy fire, and the Russians are pretty focused in this area, have been very focused in this area since the previous weeks, for the previous 2 weeks or something like this. There are fortified Ukrainian positions. Just to increase the numbers of this, we're gonna see that there is a real focus, more or less big focus of the Russians, so which confirms the Russians are planning to cut this area, to cut this artillery pocket, and to maintain the line of combat contact. As for Siversk, the Russians published the video of how they were bombing the central part, the railway station, the warehouses and ammo depots inside of the stronghold with FABs. Obviously, the active phase of Siversk offensive operation is ongoing. We can't tell for sure whether the Russians are able to capture Siversk by the end of the summer, but obviously this is going to be the main battle of the early autumn. Now let's move to Chasiv Yar. We have additional very important updates. As we can see, we have adjusted the map between Kalinovka and Chasiv Yar itself. According to different neutral mappers, the Russians captured some part of this area, but according to geolocations we received during the previous night, we see that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. In this video we can see 2 Russian soldiers who crossed Seversky Donetsk Donbass Canal in this area. The this is it. This is the area, and the Russians were moving towards Ukrainian side of Chasiv Yar and Seversky Donetsk Donbass canal. Let's take a look at this video once again. Two Russian soldiers crossed the canal, and then they crossed the road and entered the forest and started moving somewhere in the vicinity of the central part of Chasiv Yar. Later, the same group returned back, and then they were moving somewhere here, and Ukrainians were FPV drone the Russians there. So this is the reason we have adjusted the map, and this is the reason we have increased the gray zone on the Ukrainian side. This is the forest Orlova, so most likely a very big part of this forest Orlova is already under Russian control. As you can see, the Russians are not storming the main citadel in Chasiv Yar. They're trying to bypass, and they're trying to enter this part of Chasiv Yar and to capture this territory before the next stage of offensive operation. So significant progress, as we can see. Now we are moving probably to the most important territory and to the most important changes on the ground, and we are talking about Toretsk agglomeration. Today the Ukrainian sources published something unbelievable and something that nobody can believe in, and this map changes. As you can see, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to capture significant fortification areas. The Russians captured this stronghold that was it's very important stronghold. This is the landfill, and this is the Terikon, and also the coal mine. And according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians captured these territories as a result of clashes during the previous let's say 3 days or 4 days. So they managed to enter and to reach the next citadel inside of the stronghold itself. So obviously the Ukrainian defense belt collapsed in this area. This is very important progress. The battle is already taking place inside of this area, and as you can see, the Russians managed to develop this operation, this Toretsk offensive operation, without any progress from the southern part, without additional progress from the northeastern part, and of course without any progress towards the main supply road N32, which confirms that Ukrainian defense in this area is so poor that they are not able to protect even the territory that has significant number of strongholds inside of it. A very, very big disaster for the Ukrainians in this area continue developing. As for Novoalexandrovka area, the Russians managed to improve their positions as well. According to different mappers, the Russians improved their territory and captured these tree lines and these fortifications, getting closer and closer to the next village by the name of Vovchansk. So as you can see, the situation for the Ukrainians is very bad. As for Sokil, we have additional updates also from different mappers that the Russians managed to improve their positions and to capture Sokil completely, and also the Russians captured first buildings, not just the first, but probably 30%, even more, of the village by the name of Evgeniivka. The Ukrainians are forced to fall back. The Ukrainians tried to slow down the Russians at least a bit by FPV droning them and artillery striking on them. Also, we have additional progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation towards the village of Novoselovka Persha. Also, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, additional gains were discovered by the Ukrainians, and the Russians are getting closer and closer, and very soon the battle for the village itself is going to start. The critical situation continued developing in the town by the name of Krasnogorovka. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions along Grigoria Skavorodina Street. This one, additional gains. As you can see, the Russians are trying to dig in deeper between Ukrainian positions, and according to information we have, the Russians also captured the northeastern part of the stronghold of the town, and the Russians captured another high-rise building area. So this is the Russian progress, and this is the Russian progress. And as we understand, most likely the Ukrainians, if there are Ukrainians between this citadel, between the hospital, obviously the Ukrainians are planning to begin withdrawing process, and they're going to do this very, very soon and very, very fast, trying to avoid the possible encirclement by the Russian forces. And according to some resources, the Ukrainians have already made this, and there are no more Ukrainians, and the Russians are just moving very slowly, step by step, trying not to get into another ambush or being destroyed as a result of Ukrainian, let's say, sniper fire or something like this. Maximilianovka. The Russians continue offensive operation. According to unconfirmed reports, the Russians managed to improve their positions inside of the village by the name of Maximilianovka and to capture additional tree line and additional few buildings. So the active phase of clashes for this village also continue, and after this the Russians will begin the battle for Kurakhova. As for Novomikhailivka, Konstantinovka, also according to different sources, the Russians managed to improve their positions between the fields between Novomikhailivka and Pobeda, trying to maintain the line of combat contact to shorten the line, and this will allow the Russians to release additional forces that can be used for further offensive operation, let's say in the northern part of Konstantinovka itself, so to 20524 road. Significant progress, as you can see, of the armed forces of Russian Federation. As for Rozhain and Zaporozhye, we have no changes on the ground, just regular updates, but the important thing is that the Russians continue sending additional reinforcements, significant number of armored vehicles, personal carriers and tanks and many other armored arms the Russians are sending to Zaporozhye and Kherson direction. So something big probably is going to start happening in this area as well. During the previous night, the Russians also managed to discover another Ukraine S-300 position in the vicinity of Odessa, and as a result of Iskander strike, that S-300 system was destroyed. So we see that situation is very, very bad for Ukrainians, and I'm not even sure how exactly they're going to act this situation, because probably before the beginning of NATO summit, the Ukrainians will lose Krasnogorovka, the Ukrainians will probably lose Vozdvizhenka, probably the Ukrainians will lose Pivdinne and maybe Pivdinne and Druzhba. Probably the Ukrainians will completely lose the eastern Chasiv Yar, and the battle is going to start place in the central and the western Chasiv Yar itself. The Ukrainians most likely will lose completely the northern Vovchansk. So as you can see, nothing good for the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.